Hello, today I'll be doing a re-ranking for one of my personal favorite bands, and that band is Deftones. This is a re-ranking that's definitely long overdue, because the last time I ranked their albums, Ohms wasn't out yet, so yeah, definitely, again, long overdue, but glad I'm finally getting around to doing this. But this is also a band I'll be seeing live for the first time later this week, and on top of that, I'm doing VIP, so I'm going to be meeting the band too. Definitely super stoked for that, but let's go ahead and dive into this ranking. We'll be going from worst to best. Keep in mind, this is just my personal ranking. You don't have to agree with it, but feel free to let me know your ranking in the comment section below. But yeah, honestly, there are some placements in my ranking that I really could change at any time. But at the bottom, to no surprise, and I'm sure this is probably at the bottom for many fans, but still an album that I enjoy, and I am a defender of this album. But at the bottom, we got Gore. So yeah, I like this. I seem to enjoy this album more than some people. Even though it's still at the bottom, I still do like this album. And again, I am a defender of this album. I do think you do have some pretty good songs on here, like Prayers Triangles, which is easily my favorite of the singles. Hearts Wires, I think, is also another highlight on the album. You also have Phantom Bride, which features Jerry Cantrell of Alice in Chains, and of course that's easily another one of my favorites on here. I mean, if you got Jerry Cantrell, I mean, more likely it's going to be one of my favorites. And then you have the album closer, Rubicon, which I think is hands down maybe one of their most underrated songs. I really like that song a lot. You move towards some of the heavier songs. I do really dig Doomed User. That's another pretty good song on here. Acid Hologram is probably another one of my favorites on the album. Really, the only song I don't really care for on here is track number 6. Forgive me if I butcher the pronunciation here, but Pittura Infamante. Again, forgive me if I butchered the pronunciation there, but that's one of the few Deftones songs that I don't really care for. Not horrible, but doesn't really do a whole lot for me. Always been my least favorite on here. Xenon, I think, is another somewhat underrated deep cut on here, but yeah. Gore, to me, a solid album. But next we're moving to Saturday Night Wrist. There are days that where I might have this album higher in my ranking, but for now it's right here. And basically, this is one of those albums to me where I think you have a stronger first half but a somewhat weaker second half. But I do think the second half does have some highlights though, like Rats, 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 which is one of the heavier songs on here and also one of my favorites on the album. You also have Kim Dracula, which is maybe one of my favorites in general when it comes to Deftones deep cuts. But you move towards the first half, you have Hole in the Earth, which is maybe the biggest song on here. Really like that song a lot. Maybe one of their best singles, maybe. You have Rapture, which is another one of the heavier songs on here. That's another one of my favorites. You also have Cherry Waves, which is one of the fan favorites on here, and for good reason. Definitely one of my personal favorites on here. And then you have Maine, which, when it comes to the band's singles, I think this is definitely one of their more underrated singles. You also have Serj Tankian on here, which, hey, that's definitely an added bonus there. I mean, System of a Down, another one of my favorite bands. But Maine, yeah, love that song. But yeah, Saturday Night Wrist, even with it being this low in the list, I mean, again, there are days where I might have this 1 or 2 spots higher, but for now, this is where it lands. But still, pretty good album. A bit more experimental, but personally, I dig it though. From what I remember hearing somewhere that apparently Chino's not a big fan of this album. I can't remember where I heard it, but either way, if it's true, hopefully, maybe one day he'll change his mind on it. But at the same time, I do remember reading a little bit on this album, and apparently the band, there was some inner turmoil going on around this era of the band, but to me, even with all that, I still think the album turned out pretty good. But next we're moving to the self-titled, and this is definitely an album that's grown on me over the years. Because when I was first getting into Deftones, this was an album that that's always been very low in my ranking. But even though it's still not one of my personal favorites, I still think it's actually a pretty good album. Yeah, it opens up with maybe one of my favorite Deftones songs, Hexagram. I definitely dig the heaviness of that song. Needles and Pens and Good Morning Beautiful are some of my favorite deep cuts on the album. I do also dig the heaviness of When Girls Telephone Boys. You also have Bloody Cape, which is a song that's grown to be maybe one of my favorite Deftones songs. Really like that song a lot. Moana is another song that I think is somewhat underrated on here. You also have Minerva, which is maybe the biggest song on here. That's another one of my favorites on the album. I even like the more experimental or more electronic song on here. And I believe this song was also on the soundtrack for Matrix Reloaded. That song being Lucky You. Then you have Anniversary of an Uninteresting Event, which has always been my least favorite song on the album. But even that song I think is still alright. But yeah, self-titled Deftones, good album. Next we're moving to the album where this was the latest album at the time when I first became a fan. And that album is Diamond Eyes. Another pretty good album from them. And this is a band that to me has no bad albums. I know some people crap on Gore, but to me I think those people are wrong. Again, I do defend that album, but Diamond Eyes, another strong album in their discography. Even the singles I think still hold up. Songs like Diamond Eyes, Beauty School, Rocket Skates, and so on. You've Seen the Butcher. But I think that you also get some of the band's best deep cuts on here, like Risk, and I really like Command Control. A bit of a shorter track, but I definitely dig that song. Rhythmically, I like what they're doing in that one too. Royal is another pretty good deep cut on the album. But yeah, Diamond Eyes, it's no surprise, another really good album for them. But now we're moving to their debut, Adrenaline. I've kind of seen mixed opinions on this album. Some people are not big on the rawness of this album, while I've seen some people hail this one as maybe one of their personal favorites. But yeah, personally, it lands more towards the middle of my ranking. But yeah, I do really dig this debut. And when it comes to the world of nu metal, I think this is definitely one of the best debut albums in that genre. I mean, I know there is that argument about whether Deftones is nu metal or not. I'd say their first two albums especially are straight up nu metal. But especially this album, especially if you go to the more angsty lyrics or maybe song structures, or maybe even some of the riffs. I mean, but again, that can be an argument for a separate video maybe. But Adrenaline, pretty good album, pretty good debut in my opinion. You have Bored and 7 Words on here, which are the big songs on here. And I think this album has some of their most underrated deep cuts. Songs like Minus Blindfold and Root. I also like Engine Number 9, which I believe was in the movie, if I remember correctly, Law Abiding Citizen, another underrated movie. But I also like Nosebleed, one of the heavier songs on the album. Birthmark, one of the somewhat more melodic songs on here. I do like that one. But yeah, Adrenaline, pretty good debut in my opinion. But next we're moving to their latest album, Ohms. Really loved this album when it came out. My copy comes with a signed CD booklet. Wasn't in person, but they were selling signed copies on, I believe it was, I can't remember the site. Oh, it was Newbury Comics. Sometimes bands like to sell multiple signed copies of their new upcoming album. They like to do that on that site there. Either that or, of course, the band's website. But yeah, Ohms, really strong album. I mean, I still do like the singles on here, Genesis and Ohms, Ceremony. But you also have Urantia. Forgive me if I butchered the pronunciation, but that's always been one of my personal favorites on the album, and to me has some of Chino's best vocals on the album. I also like Radiant City, rhythmically probably one of my favorites. But yeah, and Error too. That's another song that I think has some of Chino's best vocals on the album too, and also another one of my favorites on here. But yeah, Ohms, really strong album for them in my opinion. The next I'm moving to my number 3 spot with Koi no Yokan. For the longest time, I had a hard time figuring out if I liked this album or Diamond Eyes more, but nowadays I think I've come to a conclusion that I think I might like Koi no Yokan more. And yeah, I think this is a really good album, really strong album. I mean, if I had to pick which is maybe my least favorite on here, maybe What Happened to You, but that's not really saying a whole lot because I still think that song is also decent. But I think the singles are still really good. Leathers, I absolutely love that song, probably one of my favorite Deftones songs. Then you have Swerve City, which I think is one of their best in terms of their album openers. Rhythmically, I like what they're doing in that song. And then you have Entombed, which I think is probably one of my favorite deep cuts from Deftones in general. I absolutely love that song, especially love Chino's vocals in that song, especially such as in the chorus. Poltergeist, one of the heavier songs on here, also really good. And then you have Tempest. I remember when this album came out, I remember hearing that song on the radio. And I believe that, I want to say that song was in one of the Fast and the Furious soundtracks. Maybe the 7th one, I can't remember, but pretty sure. Graphic Nature, I think is kind of an underrated deep cut on here. But yeah, Koi no Yukon, really great album. To me, one of their best. But now we're moving to the album that some people would point to as their number one. But for me, it lands at number 2, but still really strong album. White Pony. Strong album from front to back. So some of the band's best work on here. Songs like Digital Bath, Street Carp, Knife Party has always been one of my favorite Deftones songs. You also have their big song on here, Change in the House of Flies. You also have Passenger, which is one of the fan favorites and also one of my favorites too. I mean, you have Maynard James Keenan on there, so you already got me hooked right there. You also have Korea, another one of the heavier songs on here. I really like that song too. But yeah, really good stuff. Even Back to School, which I know some fans hate on, but I have a feeling that some fans hate on just because the band doesn't like it, which to me is not a good enough excuse, not a good enough reason. But if you legit don't like it, I get it. I mean, but I don't know. I seem to like that song more than some people. Is it one of the best songs on the album? Hell no, but I still think that song is decent. Definitely of its time, but I personally don't mind that song. But now we're moving to my number one and also one of my favorite albums of all time. And that album is Around the Fur. Love this album from front to back. Not a single weak track on it. The singles on here are some of the band's best singles in my opinion. Those songs, of course, being My Own Summer and Be Quiet and Drive. My Own Summer, I believe, was my introduction to Deftones. Right from the guitar intro, I was instantly hooked. But yeah, absolutely love that song. Definitely, maybe my favorite album opener from the band too. But Be Quiet and Drive is another song that I think is easily one of the band's best singles. You move towards the deeper cuts, you get some of the band's best deep cuts on this album, in my opinion. Songs like Labia, the title track, Lotion, which I think is a really underrated song. You also have Head Up featuring Max Cavalera. I mean, I do really like Max Cavalera. I mean, Sepultura, of course. You also have Soulfly, which is also great. I do like his side project with Alex Newport from Fudge Tunnel, if I got the band right. Nail Bomb is pretty cool too. I do also like Cavalera Conspiracy, but yeah, Head Up, definitely a banger for sure. And then I do also like MX. Don't mind the female vocals in that one too. If I remember correctly, the person that does female vocals in that song, I believe, is Abe Cunningham's wife. From what I remember, but there's also, if you listen to the album version of MX, there's a hidden track. There's two. There's one called Bong Hit, and then there's Damone, comes later at the end. I think that's, if you haven't heard Damone, definitely check it out. Really good song, but yeah, all around a really great album, and definitely my favorite Deftones album, and again, definitely one of my favorite albums of all time, for sure. But yeah, that is my ranking of all the Deftones album. Let me know your thoughts on my ranking, and of course, let me know some of your favorite or least favorite albums, and let me know some of your favorite or least favorite songs from this band, and also let me know if you've seen this band live, and if so, let me know what you thought of them live in the comment section below, since that I'll be seeing them live for the first time later this week. Definitely really stoked for that. But again, that is my ranking. Let me know your ranking in the comment section below and all the good stuff. But anyways, thanks for watching. Please leave a comment and a like. subscribe, have a nice day, and take care.